How you doing, VC? Vinyl community. Hey, I get to say VC. I've been watching a lot of videos in the last little while, very interesting videos, and seeing all your wonderful record hauls. I thought I'd do one myself, considering that I think Discogs has a hitman looking for me. I've used it so much in the last month. I tallied up the values and it scared the hell out of me. Not just from Discogs, but also from eBay and from Amazon. So I've got some interesting things to show you today. Not all, in fact, hardly any classical. In fact, I've not listened to a classical record in about a month, which is the first for me, considering it consumes my whole life, whether writing about it or playing it or conducting it, and has done since I was 7 years old. But I've really enjoyed getting to know a lot of rock records, courtesy of my nephew, Ian Kershaw, who is now our intern and also equipment manager, which means he schleps amplifiers and gets to help me out. A wonderful young man with a record business of his own. So he's been showing me lots of different, playing for me lots of different great rock vinyl records that I've kind of heard in cursory settings, but never sat down on a really good system and listened to the vinyl. And he's got great pressings of everything. So I've had a great time, and I want to show you what I've got. This is over about a month, so 4 weeks. It's quite a few records. Primarily rock records and jazz records. So without further ado, let's begin. I'm actually getting better at this. I've taken the shiny plastic covers on so I don't glare you guys. This is a very interesting LP from Yarlung Records. I think it was recorded in 2017. It's kind of run by a guy named Bob Attia, who's a kind of wonderful fellow who remasters and engineers these records. This is the Yuko Mobuchi Trio. She's from Japan, incredibly talented young lady. This is a live recording, 45. It's got that kind of audiophile stamp on it, which is usually a mark of death for the artists that are associated with it, because it's usually mediocre performances. Sorry to say, but they are, and wonderful recordings. This is both. This is a wonderful recording by Bob Attia, and I think that's how you pronounce his name. And Miss Mobuchi is incredibly talented. She's a pianist, studied in Japan and then studied in LA, then developed a trio in Japan, both the drummer and the bass player from the States. But she has great technique, and she has a beautiful tone, and she has very interesting ideas, and she can swing. She's got it all. I can highly recommend this record. Now, it's only 4 songs. It goes by very quickly at 45. This is only volume 1. I wish there was volume 2. They're both about $50 a record, so it's not a cheap listen, but boy, is it good. And Yarlung Records, I've heard nothing but great things about these guys. Let's see if that, there we go, Yarlung Records. In the back, you can see it's a drummer, Bobby Britton, and her bassist, Del Atkins. Yuko Mobuchi Trio. Very highly recommended. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago. Oh, this is very shiny. This is the Record Store Day hype sticker, just if you want to put a freeze on that. I wrote an article about collecting records in the here and now, and it's a bit of a jungle out there, pricing wise, and getting product. And I didn't even know. I'd heard of Record Store Day, but I didn't know what it was. Turns out it's a wonderful day. I think it's March 22nd every year, and lots of companies put out new pressings. This was one of them. I'm not sure, I think it was 2020. I'm not sure if it was last year or this year. Anyway, this is the great Chet Atkins. Oh, Chet Atkins, excuse me. The equally great Chet Baker, trumpet and singing. And this is the Riverside. This is the Craft Recordings reissued, which is always a great bet with the original mono tapes with Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio, all analog mastering. Now we know what's going on with that, but with Coherent, Kevin Gray, Bernie Grunman, Analog Productions, Impex Records, Abby Fawn, people like that, you can pretty well guarantee you're going to get the all analog tapes. No fibbing like the other company. So that's a wonderful record. You don't need me to tell you about that. I mean, you should all have that. It's fantastic. And again, isn't it interesting how all these superb mono records are coming out? People want them in mono. There's Herbie Mann, Mr. Grumpy on flute. I met him a couple of times. Not the happiest man, of course. The great Bill Evans and Philly Joe Jones. It's a wonderful, wonderful record. Chet. Even without the plastic cover, there's glare. My apologies. One of the records my nephew brought over was Jethro Tull Aqualung. Well, everybody knows that. Well, of course, I'd heard of it, but I'd never heard it before. And being a flute player, and Ian Anderson being a great singer and flute player, I should have known his playing. I remember when I was in grade 7 or 8 reading an article about by Ian Anderson saying, and I was totally madly in love with the instrument, the flute, and he was saying, you know, don't compare me with these people like James Galway and all these great players. He says, I don't even know the mechanics of my instrument. So he was quite honest. And so I kind of dismissed it for a long time, stupidly, of course. I mean, I'd heard of him, and other people I respected said, oh, no, he's a very good player. And I finally put on Aqualung, and my wife said, you know, darling, I don't think you're going to like this. she knows all these records from when she was a kid. And I thought, okay. And I absolutely loved it. Incredibly inventive. In fact, I ordered their first album as well. That's coming. Their debut album, This Was. And not only is it incredibly inventive, but, you know, he's a fine player. Beatboxing well before that became vogue. And he's also a very good singer and well recorded and incredible artwork. And that's a no-brainer. Everybody knows that. Now I do, finally. Only took 66 bloody years. That's the back. And that's an original Chrysalis. By the way, there is I forget the name of the guy who did a remastering. They got a lot of ballyhoo, but it was, you know, digital tape. Sorry, digital. And I heard it in the first bar. It just doesn't compare to this original. And this is kind of like a $10 original. So there you go. Jethro Tull Aqualung. There's the famous Who. And of course, it's a very famous record. The rock opera, the Tommy. And I'd heard about it, heard the, you know, Pinball Wizard and a few songs on it. But it's a very creative album. I'm so glad I got it. This is a New Zealand pressing. It sounds absolutely wonderful. There's the back. Sorry about the glare again. And like I said, an original but a New Zealand pressing, very clean. And I'm hearing some horn playing at the beginning. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, let's see who do they get to in the London sessions to play horn on it. And lo and behold, it's John Entwistle, the bass player, who grabbed a French horn, learned a few notes, and does a great job. Very inventive. And Pete Townsend's a very good composer. It's very creative. I love it. I don't need to tell you that. You already love it. Now I do. And it's a great recording. There's another Who. This is Who's Next. Very interesting cover. Ian suggested this one after I enjoyed Tommy so much, and it's just a wonderful album. Really maintains interest, great vibe, great energy, great rhythm, interesting harmonies. It's very good. Very pretty straightforward English pressing, early pressing. It's kind of worn, not of the cover, but not the record, and very, very good. Who's Next? That's the second Who album I've got. This is one of my favorite singers. This is Julie London, called Julie Is Her Name. This is her debut album on Liberty. It's a very beautiful mono. And I think her husband, Bobby Troop, I don't think she was a husband then. She was married to Jack Warner, and then she married Bobby Troop, the famous composer of Route 66. And I think he produced this album. Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful, great playing. I think Barney Kessel's on it and a few other people. Absolutely beautiful. Not cheap. I think people have discovered Julie London and the quality of her records, and in good condition, they're quite expensive. I keep the plastic on this one so you can see the hype sticker, Tone Poet. This is Blue Train. I've had a couple of versions of Blue Train, but I didn't have a really good stereo copy. This is the Tone Poet version. It's just absolutely amazing. And I got this from Amazon. I think it was about $50 or $60 Canadian. What's that, about $7 US? Anyway, it's superb, as you all know. I'll do the same with this one for the hype sticker. This is Chad's Lush Life, John Coltrane. This is the mono, but it's 33 on 45. It's a spectacular performance. Just beautiful. Couldn't believe I didn't have that either. It's a Japanese pressing of My Favorite Things with Coltrane on soprano. Japanese pressing. Treated myself. They're always quite a bit more money, but the vinyl they use is amazing. The vinyl combination. I think it's JVC Super Vinyl it's called. And of course it's got the sash on the obi, which adds about $30 or $40 to the price, unfortunately. But I do love them. And they do sound great. This is this one. This is the stereo version. Another Japanese Coltrane. This is Giant Steps. I didn't have Giant Steps. I mean, I know the chart. I know how difficult it is. So I treated myself to that. That was off Discogs. Again, big bonus for this Japanese pressing. And then, of course, for having the sash, it's even more expensive. Crazy stuff. But, and a lot of these actually came from Japan, from a store in Tokyo. And they're so good. They ship so quickly. They get in about 4 or 5 days. But that's fantastic pressing. You all know this one, Sticky Fingers from the Stones. After I reviewed the Stones box in mono, I really wanted to hear some of the other ones as well. Because I really, after, I think it was 14 records of the Stones, I really enjoyed it so much. And this is, of course, a little bit later. I think this is on the Rolling Stones Records, which is their own label. Where is it? There it is. And it's just fantastic. This is the one, of course, excuse me, ladies, the one with the zipper that works. Sticky zipper. Anyway, wonderful. This is a very interesting record. Introduced to me by my nephew, Jack Johnson. I've heard of him, of course. He's pretty popular, but I'd never heard him sing and play, and he's very fine. It's lovely music, great songs, and this is the 20th anniversary pressing of his Brush Fire Fairy Tales. This is Bernie Grundman, just an exquisite remastering, very subtle, perfectly flat, perfectly quiet vinyl. A very beautiful record. Everybody knows this one. The first record post Steely Dan by Donald Fagen. Resident Genius, it's Steely Dan. And this, of course, the music is spectacularly good. It doesn't date. It's kind of a perfect fusion of jazz and rock music, played by all the best session guys in LA and New York. This is the Japanese pressing. This is I think it's one of the first fully digital recordings, and it's quite successful. It's not as good as some of the analog beauties from Steely Dan. They tried the digital with Gaucho, and it just about caused a war there because they couldn't manage it. They even went back to 3M Company in Minnesota and took lessons and stuff with it, but they couldn't make it work. So Gaucho is all analog, and it's a beautiful recording. This is not quite as good with the digital domain, but it's actually, the music is so wonderful. You should buy it anyway. And I've got it in the Japanese pressing, so it's very quiet. So you get to all the subtleties of Fagen's voicings and his beautiful compositions. Highly recommended. This is a Tone Poet. I'll give you the hype sticker. Again, I'm keeping the plastic on because I want to show you the hype sticker. It's very, very important. You know that. This is Chet Baker Sings and Plays with Bud Shank and Russ Freeman and strings. Now, this is an interesting record. It's beautifully performed, as usual, by Chet Baker. Very sensitive, great playing and singing. And this time, Bud Shank is highlighted on the cover. And Bud Shank kind of was one of the very early specialists in jazz flute, kind of an LA session guy, great sax player, but also a very fine flute player. Now, here's where the interesting thing happens. A flute in the upper register is very difficult to control for the player and very difficult to record. Anyway, it's very challenging to record the flute. And Bud Shank is a very good flute player, concert quality flute player in addition to being a great jazz sax player. And his upper register is very powerful. And the microphones don't really capture it that well. In fact, it borders on not so much distortion, but the recording process is not enjoying recording the flute. It doesn't matter. It's a wonderful performances, and it's very worth getting. And it wasn't that expensive. And the Tone Poet, of course, is just, the pressings are very nice. And this is mastered by Kevin Gray at Coherent. Highly recommended. This is a kind of a flavor of the month record. And it should be the flavor of the decade or even millennium record. It's a wonderful reissue. This is Love, and it's Forever Changes. And I started reading about it and hearing about it on YouTube, and bought it, and it's just a fantastic record. Google the story or Wikipedia them. It's an interesting story, quite a sad story from the lead singer, but a great group, very inventive, good songs, and the record is wonderful. This is, I think, the Rhino pressing, but I think it's Kevin Gray. I'm not sure who did the remastering, but it's exceptionally good. Everybody loves Miles, and Lee Morgan, and even Kenny Dorham gets a lot of look in these days, but you should also have a listen to Book a Little. Again, this is a Japanese pressing. So I was very lucky, because this is one of my favorite records. Book a Little was a great trumpet player. Unfortunately, he died very young of uremia, kidney disease, when he was 23 years old. What a tragedy. But the man can swing and play. I don't think he's quite in Lee Morgan's faking ability and Kenny Dorham's tone, but he's close and certainly deserving of your listen. Great tracks, very interesting, great improvisation skills, great tone, great technique, and a really good range. Book a Little, so look for that one. Of course, if you can get it in this Japanese pressing, it's very quiet and sounds amazing. I did a full video on this one. This is a UHQR from Analog Productions. Chad's kind of like paean to the vinyl world. Clarity vinyl, very, very quiet, amazing pressing at quality record pressings, quality control from beginning to end. This is the 45, and it's spectacular. It's 150 US. It's not cheap, but if you want to get one or two of them, I've got two of them to beat. This is fantastic. And my second one, and I think it's going to be my last one for a while at $150 each. This is the only Steely Dan that I didn't have. Can't Buy a Thrill, their debut album, which is remarkably assured. Again, UHQR Clarity vinyl. This is the 33. I slummed it with the 33. It's actually amazing. And Bernie Grundman remastering. It's spectacular. This one I think is about $100. It's still very expensive, but you know, it's a lifelong record. It's got that beautiful RCA Soria spine, just gorgeous. Highly recommended. And this is the granddaddy of my purchases. This is the Rolling Stones in mono, about 15 LPs, and very much like the Beatles one, except the quality control is not so good on this one. First, no book. We get a booklet. It's good. It's got some nice photographs in and a pretty good essay, but not like the Beatles book, which is just tremendous. There they are, the guys. This is an example of the records. This is Out of Our Heads. I'm not sure if this is the US or the British pressing, but you can see the colored vinyl. They all come in different colors. And I had to drill the holes out a little bit more. But 10 out of the 15 LPs were warped quite significantly. They still played okay, but and of course it's from a digital source because the tapes were wrecked, so they had to use the digital for the remastering. And it's not bad. It's not bad, but you know, I think I've shown you Sticky Fingers already, which is you know, a totally analog British pressing. It's just magnificent. So you get what you get. This is the 2021, I think, or 22 version, the colored vinyl. The 2016 version is with black vinyl. I've heard the quality control is better, but it's not bad. This is an interesting one, courtesy of my nephew. This is Pink Floyd's Atom Heart Mother, and it's an English pressing. The music is odd. It's well constructed and interesting. I'll just leave it at that. But it's very well played and well sung. But the recording, this is a UK pressing, the recording is spectacular. I would have a stream of this first before you purchase it. This was a $100 record, so it's not cheap. But I mean, literally worth it for the UK pressing. It's just magnificent. You see the EMI there. Everybody has this, except me, of course. This is Jennifer Warren's famous Blue Raincoat with all the great songs by Leonard Cohen. She sings them beautifully, great band with it. This is the Impex reissue, which is pretty spectacular. It's the Impex thing. I think it's Bernie Grundman, but it's absolutely beautiful. Dynamic, smooth, just a brilliant record. I think I got that on Amazon for like $60. I just got this yesterday, ordered it off Discogs. Japanese pressing of Art Pepper meets the Rhythm Section, one of the world's greatest jazz records, certainly one of the greatest alto players of all time. Again, Google his story, Wikipedia his story, quite a dramatic story. But what a musician. I had, I think it was an OJC of this, or a pretty bad digital version. It wasn't very good. I was expecting really good with this pressing, but not what I got. It is absolutely magnificent. If you can get this pressing, and this was near mint off Discogs, I highly recommend it. The music everybody knows, the recording is, but the playing and the recording is just amazing. So that's, I think it's a Discogs, again, not cheap, but this one was worth every penny. Now, I needed a Dylan. Of course, I knew who Bob Dylan was, and I've heard him sing, or kind of do his kind of speech song kind of thing. And Nobel Prize for Literature, the whole deal with his wonderful lyrics. But again, I kind of borrowed this permanently from my nephew. This is the Freewheelin'. I'm not sure what year it is. It's very early because he was very young. He almost didn't get his contract renewed because they didn't sell very many of his debut album. But this is mono, Columbia, can you believe it? It is absolutely spectacular. The mono is amazing. It feels like Bob's in the room with you playing his guitar, which he plays beautifully, by the way, and uses his harmonica. And it's so intimate. It's immediate. It's that typical great, the very best in mono. So if you can find that, and if you're not into Dylan, or if you never really listened to his music, I highly recommend it. The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan.